Hello everyone, DCB here, and welcome to a Warhammer Age of Sigmar model build / painting video. In this video I am going to be building and painting the easy build Nighthaunt Warlock Banshees. I'm doing these in a different way, so I'm using a mixture of contrast and standard paints from the Cathedral range. I'm going to be experimenting with some different styles of painting and different ways of using the normal and contrast paints. As always, when I'm building these out of this box, they will be mold line removed and that, which I'll show you on screen. Depending on the length of the video, I'll either decide to go full time-lapse or only time-lapse in some areas. So, without any further ado, let's begin the video. Right, so first things first, getting these guys out of the box. First thing you may notice is that they are green instead of white. I'll show you how the instructions work on this particular easy to build. So as you can see, they do have numbers next to them, which will relate to the numbers in the instruction manuals. Take the bits out of the sprues. Of course, being careful not to damage the models in any way, shape or form. Now, I do make a mistake and I will admit it now before you see it later in the video. I glue these before I paint them. And as you can probably guess by the way that these models look, that to get a good and proper paint job on all areas of it, you want to do it separately. Also, it is not necessary to glue the easy to build ones. I just decide that it is a good thing to do, as it makes the hold a lot stronger to the model. And of course, by removing the mold lines, it makes the paint job a lot more streamlined and also has a lot less like lumps and bumps on the model itself. As you can see, this is where I do start to glue them, which of course is a stupidity on my part, and put them together like, well, there. For example, I do this with most of the models apart from one, and as I say, that is because of my own stupidity. But as you can see, some things times it doesn't really matter. Like that, it wouldn't have mattered. But yeah, moving on to well, the rest of the models being put out the sprues. Speed it up a bit so you don't have to wait too long for the next parts and all that kind of stuff. Once again, making sure that the mold lines are removed, showing you there that this one, even though I do try to stick it, doesn't actually stick properly, which is a blessing at the end of the day because I did sort of misput it together. That's the downside with the instructions. Even though it tells you which parts of the model go where, it doesn't exactly tell you how best to put them on or what order to put them on in. Sort of a trial and error stage as well. Moving it on a bit. Once again, making sure that I get all the nasty bits off of the mold line removers, any sort of bits that shouldn't be on there. Put them together, making sure everything fits, and I say gluing them on before painting, which was my mistake on this particular build. Getting the last one out now, quite simply mix down, wipe down, ready to go. Sticker owner job. Rushing a bit, I was building these. Now I do a spray in Wraithbone Right. This is a good neutral colour, a very light colour. It's great for sort of spirits, flesh tones, stuff like that. You don't have to always spray your bases white or black. You can always spray them like blues, yellows, greens, whatever you want. It's just I decided to go with white for this particular one, and Wraithbone because it's more of a cream than a white. So starting the bases, I did go with some stony colours. Now I, after watching this back, noticed that the light does unfortunately interfere with the painting styles, so I'm going to have to, in the future, make sure that I paint not direct sunlight whenever possible. I do go over the stone layers with a different grey later. It just sort of will stand out eventually on the faces there. Just a nice light thing also for the tombstones to show that they are obviously stone rather than any sort of like fencing or anything like that. But that's the first one done. We'll always start with the tombstones and that on this one. Now moving on to Warlock Bronze. This is a nice sort of light bronze for the armor or chest pieces of these Banshees. As you can see, that's where the top came off. It dries in a nice sort of rusted bronze rather than a bright golden bronze. So it looks like it's been weathered or it's old and ancient. I do this for all the tops, the arm bits of the Banshee where that breastplate is, because that's the name of that particular armor. It protects the breastbone, the chest cavity, where your heart, lungs would be if you're alive, and where the main bit of the spirit sort of lifts up this part of the old being that used to be the Banshee before it died, and I just think it looks a bit more awesome, as you can see there. Next we go with some nice Balthasar gold. This is for the hilts of the knives and the tops of the knives, just to make them stand out against the Warlock Bronze of the armor, making them look a bit more unique, a bit more special. I also do it for the sheath of the knife on this one as well, so where it would sit if it was put away. I also decide to use this on the lantern bits as well, just there like that, to bring out the lantern on this one a bit. There'll be something special going in there later. I also decide after a bit to do the sort of like iron girdings as in this Balthasar gold. It just seems to help a bit, but I will be going over those in a different colour later to make them stand out a bit differently from the handles of the knives that the Banshees used. It's just a base coating. Moving on to a bit more of that sort of colour for the bases, putting it out a bit more so you can see the difference in that with this Caliban green, to bring up the ivy of the plant life basically. I do this for the bases. I do this on the models as well, wherever there's sort of like ivy or plant life, just so you can see the passage of time where things have grown over the graveyard where these Banshees are located. Of course you don't have to. I just decided that it was what I wanted to do. It's a shame that the video file for the trees got corrupted. I did those in a contrast wildwood colour, just so you know what colour they were. It's just the file for that one. Unfortunately, became corrupted during the editing process, and unfortunately couldn't recover it. Moving back down now to Skeleton Horde for the sort of mouths of the Banshees, because I thought, you know, the ones that had that jawbone, it'd be good to have like an actual jaw. I also do this for like the skulls and the like skeletons in the graveyard bits. I go over it twice in the graveyard bits, just so they can stand out a bit more against the backdrop of the grey of the stone and stuff like that, and the green of the ivory. Just because I wanted to, really. Moving on to the Allogranular Grey. This is to help bring out the gravestones a bit more, making a bit more lighter, like they've been weather worn, stuff like that. That time has made them fade. Do this for obviously the gravestones on the Banshees themselves, front and back. You can see that's starting to pick out there, make it a bit more lighter. I also do it for these plinths on the bases. Once again, it helps bring out the colour and make it look like time has made them a bit more dull, a bit more faded, instead of like a strong, dark, fresh gravestone colour. I know that it's not the best weathering idea or pattern, but it's what I decided to do for this particular style that I wanted to do it in. Right, moving on to the blue, starting off with a very dark blue, not ultramarine blue by any stretch of the imagination. These are going to be for the spirit bits of the Banshees, so sort of like the dress bits, which I decided was going to be the more like spirit aspect of the Banshee in my case. And of course this is Kantar blue, just in case you wanted to know. It's not such it's a more darker blue than ultramarine blue, but not a McCraft blue. That really helps, doesn't it? Really helps explain. But there we go. There we go. As you can see, I'm doing it for the dresses or the base spirit level of the Banshee, as I decided it was applicable. I decided to go for a sort of blue instead of a green for the spiritual, and so instead of like a smoke, it was like a solid, a solider spirit. Does that make any sense? But yeah, that's what I decided, and then I was going to lighten it up with other colours, and then go over it with a contrast to sort of see how that came out, so to speak, on them. Right, so yeah, and don't forget to do it where the spirits are sort of going through the thing. So now moving on to a layer of Balgrath blue. This is more of a electric blue, as you can see, a much lighter blue. I do go over a few times in this one, so a few layers of it, just so it goes through and stuff like that. Helps lighten the spirit, as you can already see. It's done a big difference there, making it a lot more, well, when it's finished, the effect will hopefully look a lot more ethereal, so to speak, a lot more spiritual, as the spirit is actually flowing out through the bronze chest armor or breastplate for it there. And one more to do, and then we're moving on to the next bit of this particular paint build video. Yes, some Allogranular blue. This is, sorry, the Arothetic blue. This is the contrast blue. So I'm wiping it over the armor to give it a bit more of a lift, a bit more of a spiritual contrast, as well as the Blacketh blue skirts, or spirit form, or essence, if you will. This is to help lift it up and make it a bit more, as I said, ethereal, give it a bit more of a spiritual vibe, a bit more of a different and contrasting outset, so to speak, to help sort of pick it up and go into all those recesses, giving it a bit more depth, a bit more shadow, and a bit more, well, contrast, so to speak. Ooh. Ah yes, Rakoth flesh. So I decided to do the sort of top spirit parts, these rags as you could call them, a bit more fleshy, a bit more like they were torn flesh, if you will. And to do that, I do this in this Rakoth flesh, and will eventually layer it with pale rich flesh, making it not so like properly pinky, but a bit more, ragged, a bit more torn. Hopefully, look a bit more like it's ethereal flesh rather than physical flesh. I hope you understand what I mean by that when I say ethereal rather than physical, because obviously physical flesh is the stuff that you have on living models, and I wanted it to have, this particular one, to have a bit more of an ethereal nature, spiritual nature, like it wasn't actually flesh, but like a apparition of perhaps what the Banshees' flesh was when they were alive. And here's the pale witch flesh. Obviously, after shaking them up a bit and then laying it over, I do 2 layers of this witch flesh, and as I say, I hope it gives it a more ethereal nature, a bit more of a spiritual aspect to these cape bits that go over the top of the Banshee there. And as I say, I do 2 layers of this. I just don't do both layers on camera, because obviously that would be a bit much for everyone to just watch. But you can sort of hope you get the idea of what I'm going for here, what I was going for on these models, giving them a bit more of a spiritual nature rather than a physical one. So we'll just leave these dry, and then they will be done once the second layer of pad rich flesh is applied. And there we have them, all built, painted and ready to go. These Nighthawk Banshees, as you can see, this is sort of what I was going for, this sort of spiritual aspect of the dress, of flowing down, and then the sort of spiritual rugged flesh of what the Banshee was, flowing from its headpieces, moving around the bases. That were a good combination, I think, of the mud, the dresses, and the wood. You can actually see a lot of the face of the Banshee coming through that top bit, which is what I wanted, and the contrast between the spirit of the armour and the spirit of the head. So I hope that you enjoyed. Don't forget to comment, rate and subscribe. Until the next one, this is DCB. Knowledge is power if we use it wisely.